I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have a very special guest this evening. He is the founder and chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, which leads the Uhuru movement. Please give a huge welcome to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and giving us an opportunity to break out of this information silo that the rulers of this country have imposed on us. So this is I'm very happy to be here with you.
So I want to start off with explaining to people a little bit about the African Socialist Party here. Why would you just say that you decided to start the African People's Socialist Party to begin with?
Well, I think it's important to understand that I didn't start off in political life as a socialist. I just started off as a young person who couldn't tolerate the conditions that African people experience in this country initially. But I soon discovered that no matter where I looked in the world, when I saw people who looked like me, that we were faced with imposed poverty, ignorance, violence, and on the one hand, on the other hand, when I saw pictures and had experiences, I saw experiences of white people, generally speaking, they were well off, and I had to have an explanation for that. And the only explanation I had as a child, it's one that prevails to this day, unfortunately, is that the difference was based on the fact that white people were more civilized and white people were thriftier in terms of saving their monies, and as opposed to African people. That was totally unsatisfactory, and it's a hell of a burden for young African people to carry around. So I was pushed into trying to deal with the world based on the conditions that we were faced with. I initially, as a young person, I actually joined the United States Army when I turned 18 years old, assuming ridiculously that the restrictions I was experiencing on my life and the things I could expect were based on the fact that I was living in this small Florida city. And it didn't take me long to find out that that was untrue. In fact, on the very train that I rode on that was taking me to induction into the United States military, I ran into just horrible encounters of vicious anti-black sentiments coming from other white young people who were going into the military. So I actually was one of the first. I was in Berlin, Germany, when the Berlin Wall was created. I was in one of the tank outfits that was there. I was in one of the first tanks, military tanks, to face a Russian tank and a combat-related situation. And it was while I was there that the struggle of Black people in this country heated up significantly. And I would read about how African people were being beaten for trying to simply register to vote, with high-pressure water hoses being used against us, and electric prods, and just all kinds of horrible things, and bombings and killings. And so I was transferred from Berlin, Germany, into Georgia. And when I got to Georgia, I ran into so much stuff that I began to organize on the military post. And and demanded that I be released from the military. And at some point, they decided that we should have a parting of the ways, and they escorted me off the base on an armed guard. And I left the U.S. Military then and came back to St. Petersburg, Florida, where I began to organize. Not too long afterwards, I joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, organized the first membership-based SNCC chapter in this country, and engaged in all kinds of actions so that in December 1966, I snatched a 8 by 10 foot mural off the wall of the city hall that depicted African people as caricatures that could have come from Ku Klux Klan material, with huge jumbo pink lips and long extended and distorted features and arms and things like that. After demanding that it be removed, the mayor refusing to do so, I involved in a march. I snatched the mural down. I was charged with 11 offenses. I was actually tried and on more than one occasion. And one of the occasions was a felony for grand larceny. I was convicted of grand larceny about that mural. I was sentenced to 5 years in prison. I spent about 2.5 years in prison as a consequence of that. At the same time, all kinds of things was happening with the civil rights movement, the SNCC, under vicious attack throughout the country. And it soon dawned on me throughout this process that it was not good enough just to be able to protest, that we had to move beyond protest, and that we had to look at the issue of acquiring political power and exercising political power. And that's the thing that pushed me in the direction of forming a party. And eventually that party came to be the African People's Socialist Party.
Awesome. For those who are not aware, there was an FBI raid. And I do want to share a video here from one of the members, because I feel like this speech here is just absolute fire. And this was actually after the raid, and she's speaking up here about her feelings about it. And then I want to get into the actual raid. So everyone, please take a listen to this. This is amazing speech here.
If you are working with the Russian government, were you not concerned at all that
the U.S. is working with every colonial government in the world, and nobody is saying a damn thing about what the U.S. is doing in Africa? What they don't raid the homes and ask white people any questions after they come back from Israel, where they're murdering Palestinian people every single day. They don't flash bomb their homes. They don't send the police there, even though they went into international waters in a place where they are killing Palestinians on a daily basis. Nobody is asking them any questions about their affiliation. The U.S. is affiliated with all the undemocratic forces around the world attempting to oppress African and other colonized people.
Why not register?
I thought that video was just absolute fire. And so I do want to go ahead and get into the discussion about the FBI raid. So for those who are not aware, recently there was an FBI raid at the St. Petersburg location in Florida. Could you please describe to people what happened that day, and why do they believe that this organization is, I guess you would say, quote unquote, a Russian pawn per se?
Well, first of all, the woman that you just showed the clip of, her name is Akilia Naive, and she is a leader in our organization. And her residence was one of the residents that was targeted on July 29th. That was in St. Petersburg, Florida. But at the same time, they were raiding her residence. They raided my home in St. Louis, Missouri. And they, at 5 o'clock in the morning, my wife and I were preparing for the day. And this loud noise comes over the loudspeaker, declaring that everybody who was a resident in this property should come out with our hands up and our hands empty. And after saying this, these loud explosions of flashbang grenades began to go off around our house. And then I was to learn that they had actually penetrated the rear entrance of the house, and they were using flashbang grenades in the stairwell there. They were using battering rams, knocking in doors and breaking windows at the house. And when I came down the stairs that morning, I was greeted in the front of my house with an armored vehicle that was surrounded by military forces who were associated with the FBI. They were pointing automatic weapons with laser target dots on my chest as I came down the stairs. It was clear that they were prepared to kill me on the spot, and I thought that would be a likely outcome, because I remember Fred Hampton at 4 o'clock in the morning in Chicago in a similar kind of raid. My wife, who followed me because I'd asked her to stay and try to contact people to let them know when we were being raided. She couldn't do that because our phones had been jammed. On her way out of the house, that after I had opened the door, she was met with a drone that almost hit her in the face as it was going up the stairwell into the house. So they sent drones there. At the same time, they were raiding another property that we have in the south side of St. Louis, which is predominantly white. And this property was the Uhuru Solidarity Center, which is the solidarity front of our party that organizes white people to struggle for reparations for African people and to take the struggle of Black power into the white communities. They used flashbang grenades, battering rams, knocked the doors in. Upstairs at that place, there a couple lived in an apartment. They banged their way into that. They held them at gunpoint and handcuffed. As they handcuffed me outside my house, they put zip ties on me. They handcuffed my wife behind her back. And then they went to another residence there in St. Louis, occupied by the two white leaders of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess and Kitty Riley. They held them at gunpoint. They knocked in the doors there. Then they, at the same time, they raided our Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida. One of the headquarters there, they used battering rams. We have a radio station there. They took it temporarily off the air. They used battering rams, flashbang grenades, and then they went to the young woman who you saw, Keeley's resident, and they used the St. Petersburg, Florida Police Department to tell her that somebody was breaking into her car and that she should come out and investigate. And so when she came out, they used that as the basis for breaking into her car themselves. They used FBI agents to search her. In every instance, they stole all of our devices, our communications devices, our cell phones, our iPads, our laptops, every device that we had containing thousands and thousands and thousands of emails and texts and documents and things like that. And they also went into the archives with 50 years or so of archives at the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg. And they took some of the materials from the archives. They stole our financial records in St. Petersburg, Florida. So this is what happened on July 29th, when finally they would tell me why they were raiding us in St. Louis. I finally got them to say it, and they said something about there was going to be an indictment of a Russian national in Russia later that day, and that my name was involved in the indictment. And they were executing a search warrant, which was extraordinary. So I asked them to see the search warrant, and they said, well, there is a search warrant. We just don't have it with us right now, but somebody in the vicinity would have it, etc. They occupied our spaces for hours. I finally got them to allow us to leave because we were not under arrest, though they wanted to sit us on the curb, some humiliating kind of thing like that. So we refused to comply with that. They finally said that we could leave, and that when we left, that's when we learned that things were happening all around the country to us with this ridiculous assault. That we came later to see the search warrant, which was left on the table in my house. After they left the search warrant there along with the receipt for materials that they had stolen from us. So this is what happened on that day. And as I said, it was really a terroristic kind of attack that they used. I mean, that's a hell of a way. I mean, the doorbell worked, and they could have knocked on the door. They could have done anything like that. But the entire thing was fallacious. And so they determined that I'm one of 4 unindicted co-conspirators. me, Penny Hess, Jesse Neville. These are two white people in North Americans who work under our leadership. And Akeelia Naive, the young woman who you just saw, who was responsible for most of our communications, our information education kind of process. So we are unindicted co-conspirators who they determined were being used as pawns by the Russians. And we were used by pawns by the Russians because the Russians were directing us to participate in elections that were designed to undermine the electoral process in the United States. And the Russians were instructing us to engage in this a genocide convention petition movement that we had put together. This was also being done because of the Russians wanted us to do this. So it's just the most ridiculous kind of charges. And for any number of reasons, anybody that's familiar with the struggle of Black people in this country recognize that the whole Black people going to the United Nations around the genocide. I mean, 1951, Paul Robeson, W.E. Du Bois, other people went to the United Nations, charged the United States with genocide. And then our own party did this in 1982. We had the first tribunal on reparations for African people that's ever occurred anywhere. And in this reparations tribunal, we used international law as the basis for putting the United States on trial. And one part of that law was the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So we've done that. We've been there. This was 1982 when that occurred. In 1951, as I mentioned, when other Africans had gone to the United Nations, taken the petition. And, in terms of, the elections, somehow we've been being instructed to do elections by the Russians. I mean, I ran for office in 1972. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous, kinds of thing they've constructed. But what they've done is they've stole thousands of text, emails, all kinds of messages and communications that they will use to construct a legal case for this political assault that they've just made on our movement. That's part of what the objective is. It's ridiculous. So that's how that has unfolded up to now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. They've been coming after a lot of people lately. They also smeared Jill Stein when she was running for president. They said she was a Russian asset. Anybody that goes against the status quo, I would say. Yes. I do have a video here, and this is from the Burning Spear TV. Here's a little bit more of a visual here for you guys to show you what happened with the raids as well.
This is the FBI. You have a federal warrant for this address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant for this.
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
Yeah, breach, what do you mean?
They want.
I don't know.
I told them that money. Don't take it.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Guru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of black people around the world.
Very, very powerful. I have to say, it's ridiculous. They treated you guys like you were terrorists.
Yeah, they were the terrorists, and you know, part of their objective was to terrorize us. And this charge of being an unindicted co-conspirator is something that is designed to try and isolate us and to frighten people from any kind of association with us, and to make it different. And it's this ongoing need that they have to keep the African liberation movement isolated, so that we're not able to connect with and with any other peoples anywhere in this country, around the world. And we have this extraordinary program, and I want to invite you, by the way, and I want to invite all of your viewers and listeners, come to St. Louis and come to see concretely what we have done on the ground that makes us such a problem for them. And I think it's important to do that too, because it destroys whatever image they may be trying to create about us being some furtive, slinking force that's somehow working, you know, like with Russians or somebody else. Concretely, we're an extraordinary, transparent organization. You can see what we do and how we've transformed an entire community here. You heard what Akile was saying about the work that we do in St. Petersburg, Florida. I invite you to come here. I invite you to go to our office and our spaces in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in Philadelphia, and in Oakland, California, and in Huntsville, Alabama, and other places where we're actually transforming the conditions of existence that our people have to contend with as a regular part of normal existence in this country.
Could you actually sue them for this? Because I'm assuming that's a lot of damage and you would need money to repair the damage that they've done. Could you actually sue them?
I don't know. I mean, this issue is extremely important. It's fraught with all kinds of contradictions, because we're going to have to spend thousands of dollars just to get lawyers. Because this thing about being an unindicted co-conspirator is nothing to play with. I mean, as you know, they actually put W.E.B. Du Bois in 1951 on trial for the same charge that they are making against us. They put Du Bois on trial. And this is after Du Bois had done so much work with them previously against Marcus Garvey, who they also attacked. And so this is serious. And I think part of what they would do, similar to what they did in the 60s, is would have us spend the monies that we were doing to create these doulas for African women here in St. Louis, where there are enough African babies that die in the first year of life to be able to fill 15 kindergarten classrooms per year. They would have us spend the money instead on lawyers and defense and repairing the damages and things like that they've done. That's part of, we just constructed a basketball court in the middle of the most economically depressed sector in St. Louis. They would have us spend that money on lawyers and things like that. So the question of being able to sue them or anything else is fraught with contradictions. And we're open to any lawyers who would contribute to the ability to file suits against them or to take them on in any other number of ways that they have to be fought.
Well said. We've seen this happen before in the past as well with the FBI targeting Black socialists. We've seen this with MLK. In fact, there's a documentary on Hulu right now called
Right.
MLK and the FBI. We've seen it with Fred Hampton. We've seen it with Malcolm X. Why do you feel they particularly target Black socialists in this country?
I think when you put together uh, a genuine socialist movement that's part of the African community, that you get to the essential economic contradiction that exists in this country and around the world, because people like to talk about socialism, and in many instances, what they're talking about is white rights. I mean, that is to say that they believe in fighting to change things and make things better within the existing social system. They call it socialism. But the system itself has its foundation in colonial slavery. There would be no capitalism if it had not been for what Portugal did 600 years ago and began this process of kidnapping and dispersing African people around the world. And the whole world economic foundation got constructed off of that process, and it's still central to it. So when you have Africans who are really talking about socialism, they're talking about taking on the actual foundation of the capitalist social system. It's not some assumption, as Bernie Sanders might put it, that you can have $15 an hour over a number of years and have socialism, that socialism and capitalism will coexist inside the same social framework. It won't happen that way. We're talking about a mode of production. And for this mode of production, of socialist mode of production, to express itself fully, then it has the appropriate replacing the capitalist mode of production, not making it nicer, not making it better. So when African people, when the Martin Luther King gets involved, for example, in a poor people's movement in Washington, D.C., that he declares is going to shut down the airport and, if necessary, occupy the Congresses and things like that, he's talking about something different than a strike at a local auto plant. And when Malcolm X talks about that we have to be free by any means necessary, and then raises the question of colonialism, he's talking about something different. And of course, Fred Hampton, the Black Panther Party, they were talking about African people actually having power over our own lives, which means it negates the power and the authority of a colonizer that oppresses our people and exploits all of our resources as a normal function. So that's why Black people, Africans who are engaged in the struggle for socialism, not just us. I mean, look at Nkrumah, look at Lumumba, who they cut up in little pieces. The FBI working with the Belgians and the French, cut them up in little pieces, and then actually put them in vats of acid and burn the remains of that. And then using, what did they say about Lumumba? That they did that because he was working with what? The Russians. So this is a common playbook, but Africans represent such a fundamental sector of this whole political and economic configuration that constitutes this capitalist world, that's the thing that makes us an extraordinarily important force that they have to contain and deal with.
You mentioned Bernie Sanders, and I want to get your opinion about electoral politics and liberation in this country. And one of the things that we've tried to been, I guess, kind of educating people about at Revolutionary Blackout Network is that electoral politics, from our experience, and we all came from that Bernie Sanders movement, we've been disappointed with Bernie Sanders. We've been disappointed with the squad. And I think going through all of that and having so much hope, a lot of us have kind of seen that at the end of the day, maybe we've been putting too much of our focus and energy and time into electoral politics actually helping us instead of actually organizing within our community and doing mutual aid and helping each other. And I want to get your opinion when you look at someone like President Joe Biden or like a Bernie Sanders in reference to African Americans in this country. Do you feel that enough is being done to help the plight of Black Americans, and why or why not?
Well, Bernie Sanders couldn't even unite with the reparations demand, and which should have been a signal for anybody. But the thing is that we do electoral politics. I am a primary organizer of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. It's an organization that is comprised of 18 separate organizations who have united around some common principles for self-determination. And one of the things that we've done for the last 5-6 years is to host electoral schools, campaign schools, so that we're training ordinary community activists, students, people who still want to utilize the electoral process in some fashion or another. And we do this because also we recognize that there are many people who haven't come to revolutionary conclusions as such, but who will use the elections. And we also, because we believe that we have to utilize all the democratic space that's available to us, all the democratic space that's available to us, but we don't have to do it on their terms. So what we do with the schools that we've created is that, first of all, we've established a national Black political agenda for self-determination. So our school teaches and organize African people how to participate in the electoral process by putting issues of self-determination on the ballot and requiring people who run for office for the support of Black people to unite with basic principles of self-determination, reparation, Black community control of the police, moving in a way that protects the interests of African women and the African families, etc. This is the center. And then also we're training people how to do recalls. So if the person is wrong, we can bring them down. That we require everybody to unite with these principles, not the Democratic Party. We don't care if you're a Democrat or a Green or anything else. These are the principles that we say you have to be held to. As a consequence of that, we take advantage of what's supposed to be the space, the democratic space that's accessible to us. The thing is, we don't want to have a movement that prematurely is pushed out of the democratic spaces so that we can't have access to it. So we're driven underground into some other kinds of positions of desperation. The thing is that when we do this, we then have an opportunity to provide political education to masses of people around critical questions. We don't have to follow a Democratic Party program. We ran the first election in the history of this country. That young woman who you saw, who was the introduction to this, ran on a platform of reparations. That was what she ran on, unity through reparations. She ran in a majority white city. Only 20% of the population in St. Petersburg, Florida, is African. But the platform was on reparations. The platform was opposed to the gentrification that's hitting us all around the country and the world. We say, make South St. Petersburg Black again. That was on the agenda. So this is the thing that opened the door. So Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and all these other people can now talk about reparations that they never talked about before. This is the thing that you saw Barack Hussein Obama for the first time violate what was supposed to be his principles and intervene in a local election in St. Petersburg, Florida, to come out with an endorsement of our opponent. So we raise up these questions. We organize not only African people, but here this woman you just saw, she's leading in St. Petersburg, Florida, lily white St. Petersburg, Florida, marches downtown St. Petersburg with 200-300 white people behind her going, unity through reparations. This is what we have done with that. So we don't have to succumb to the nonsense of the Democratic Party, which has never served, never has, never ever will serve the interests of African people, nor will the Democratic, or Republican Party for that matter. But we have the ability to put together our own platform and then speak to our own interests. And that's what we've been doing in organizing Africans to do that. So we participate in the electoral process, but not with the Bernie Sanders, who I consider fraudulent, and who's involved in the movement for white rights. That's what they're involved in, a movement for white rights, so that they can have more democratic things, for the general white population, but it doesn't do anything to change our circumstances. So, I see white leftists, for example, who are easy to jump on the issue, and I support the freeing the person, Julian Assange. I support that. I support Chelsea Manning, supported freeing them. But none of them talked about freeing Sundiata Acoli. None of them talked about freeing those Black Panthers and Black Liberation Army forces, because to talk about Assange and to talk about the others, you are perfecting the system. To talk about freeing Sundiata and the Black Liberation Army forces, you're talking about challenging the system itself. That's the fundamental difference in the so-called Black socialists and some of the other things that they're doing. Uhuru.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that, because we have tried to. That is something I did notice coming out of the Bernie Sanders movement. It just seemed like whenever we would bring up Black issues, if we brought up reparations, when we brought up defunding the police, those issues were either shut down or they were pushed to the bottom of the list. And we were told, well, no, we can't talk about that because that's going to alienate white voters. What about the Black voters? What about us? So it just, I'm glad you said that, because that's something I did start to notice with that movement as well. When I was looking at, a lot of things about the civil rights movement, and I want to get your opinion about this. I want to know how civil rights activists were able to get thousands of people together across state lines, marches, sit-ins, boycotts, and to get that many people to come together and fight for basically what should have been just basic human rights in this country. We really struggle today just trying to get people to come to one protest. And so I want to hear from you. What is it that they could have been doing differently that we're not doing today?
I think it's really important for us to understand these different moments in history where we're involved in struggle. And it's really interesting because there is something to learn about that now. For example, in the 1950s and 60s, when, as the Chinese used to say, revolution was the main trend in the whole world. It wasn't just something that was happening in the United States. People talk about what happened with King and the civil rights movement, but also you got to remember, 1947, that's when India achieved independence. 1949, China became free. Black people, dark people all around the world were in motion, struggling to be free. And at the same time, the United States was promoting itself as this great democratic force in the world, but it had to contend with other ideas about what was the best kind of social system. So that was the Soviet Russia at the time. There was China at the time, who was saying these are the best systems. And they were showing the people of the world how horrible the United States is because of what it was doing to Black people all over the country, what it was doing to the indigenous people here. So the United States was involved in this contest to win support and from all the peoples around the world with Russia and China. So it had to make some kind of movement toward how it treated Black people, one. Two, the other thing is that this was the time where many of the white liberals inside this country were able to support some struggle for change. And they were able to support struggle for change in this country in part because what you saw with the economic situation in the United States is you had in the South, you had a labor-intensive capitalism, in the North and other places, capital-intense capitalism. And there was a need by the liberals, what would be characterized as liberals today, to change that so that the Africans who live in the South could leave the South and go to the North and work in those factories, because what had happened with the emergence of the struggle against the U.S. now becoming this big dog in the colonial world, it was now receiving all kinds of raw materials that used to go to England alone, or used to go to some other, now it's coming to the United States, and they needed to have an ability to transform these raw materials into finished products, so they need workers in the South. They need to break down the relations of production in the South that prohibited Black people from working in factories or leaving to go to the North to work in factories. So the liberals in this country were those who tried to elevate the right for Black people to vote and do all these other kinds of things so that we could be productive in the capitalist process inside the South. That was part of what it is that informed what happened. And so they're the ones who gave the money to some of the civil rights actions and things like that, which is one of the bases. All the civil rights movement had to be organized around nonviolence, and not because Black people really believe that we should just go and get clubbed to death without responding to it, but None of these liberal capitalists were going to support a movement that black people were going to fight back, that was actually going to engage in some kind of struggle. So part of what I'm saying is that the world was different. Although the more it changes, the more it stays the same, because the United States is still involved in a struggle with Russia, China, in terms of trying to prove which is the best system in the world. As you know, Biden has declared that America is a democracy and the rest of them are autocracies. And so it's not communism versus capitalism, it's democracy versus autocracy today, but some of the same players are in place. Black people are still here catching hell, struggling, trying to get out of the circumstances that's been imposed on us. And so the United States had to deal with that as well, which is one of the problems it has, because while it's talking about what a great democracy it is, then there's George Floyd. There's all these killings of black people going on a regular basis. There are more than 400 pieces of legislation now moving throughout state legislatures around this country to limit the right of black people to vote. 18 states in the United States have actually passed laws limiting the rights of black people to vote. So how are you going to be the great Democrat on the one hand, against these autocrats on the other hand, if that's the case? Well, what you do is you create a situation. So if black people are complaining about what the hell is happening to us, it's really not black people who are saying it, it's Russians. So I'm not attacking the former slaves, I'm attacking Russia. When I attack Redbud, in North St. Louis, one of the most economically depressed sectors, I'm not attacking the former slaves, I'm attacking nuclear strong Russia. This is the thing that they want to do, so that any complaint that we make, they can dismiss it, even as they call themselves this great democracy in the face of the autocrats of Russia and China, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I hope that wasn't.
Well said. Well said. Because I would love to see a movement that large in this country again. Just for other rights that we should have. We don't even guarantee health care to everyone in this country. I feel like people should be livid about that, but not enough people are, based on what I've seen.
But the country is fracturing. You see, everything is fracturing. You got mobs of white people. You're talking about the elections and how the African people, Social Party and the Uhuru movement, are bringing disgrace and disrepute to the United States because of the elections. When you had thousands of white people attack the Capitol, scaling the walls like spider people, chasing the vice president, talking about hanging him. And we are responsible for bringing disrepute to the United States around elections. That's extraordinary. And that's the reality that we are dealing with. So anyway, I know I interrupted you and I apologize for that. Yeah.
Oh, no worries. I want to get your opinion about Africa. There's been a lot of focus on Africa as well as China. But I wonder what you think about the U.S. government and why they're so focused on Africa. Do you think the U.S. government sees Africa as a threat to colonialism or capitalism and colonialism?
I think Africa has always been central, but it's seldom been necessary to speak to it as Africa. Not since the Garvey movement has it been, because what they've done, as you know, they fractured Africa now and created these artificial entities that they call countries and nations in Africa. That happened in Berlin. Some white people sat down at a table and carved up Africa and shared it out to each other. So they haven't had to deal with a single Africa. They deal with 54 different Africas. That's why Garvey was such a threat and he pulled it all together. That's why Nkrumah was such a threat when he was talking about uniting all of Africa. Because Africa is fantastically rich in terms of natural resources. There's not a single modern economy on the planet Earth that could survive without access to the wealth and resources, minerals and other resources that come from Africa. So it's always a critical asset, but they've never had to really fight for it since Garvey and since Nkrumah. They've assassinated Nkrumah, they assassinated Lumumba. They created an FBI that cut its teeth getting rid of the Garvey movement. So now that's a different situation, partially because of the contention with China and Russia, both of whom are making inroads into Africa, and because the African People's Socialist Party has pulled together an actual revolutionary African organization stretching across the globe. So we are in St. Louis and in St. Petersburg, Florida, and various places in the United States, but we are also in the Caribbean. We also have black organization in Europe and in the continent of Africa itself. So the first time there's a coherency being reachieved to the struggle for Africa. I don't know if you saw the presentation, I think it was 2019 that I made at Oxford University. I was asked to speak at Oxford, and where the whole question of the unity of Africa was something that was on the agenda, and it's still on the agenda. And so that's what's being fought for. So here's what the United States has determined. One, obviously that it feels like Russia represents a national security threat. China represents a national security threat, which is why you just had Pelosi going to Taiwan in this very provocative fashion. But she also took with her Meeks out of the congressperson out of New York, who has put legislation that's passed in the U.S. House that has determined that all of the African countries who will not go along with the United States and how it's characterizing Ukraine and Russia should be dealt with. The United States should punish them, as well as the so-called Africans in diaspora. This is what Meeks has done. You have the United States has, for the first time in the 246-year history of the Marine Corps, has made a black man a 4-star general and given him the responsibility over Africa, AFRICOM. His responsibility is to contain Africa. Again, it's not a white power that's attacking Africa. It's black people who are attacking Africa in the form of the 4-star general who's over this. And then you got Lloyd Austin, who the first time there's a black person who is the Secretary of Defense, how they characterize. So Africa is in the crosshairs, and what they have said, the outgoing person who was over AFRICOM had determined that the critical questions in Africa were so-called extremism by black people in Africa and the contention with China and Russia in Africa. That's the strategic threat that they see. And so Africa has always been on the front lines, always been there, but never had to speak to it since Garvey and since Nkrumah. And even with Nkrumah, it didn't serve to get too far off the continent itself. But you know, Martin Luther King was at the Independence Day for Ghana when Nkrumah was made president there after colonialism was formally ended. There's always been this connection, black people with Mother Africa, and increasingly what we see is that is something that's reemerging. And so even since this thing has happened with July 29th, African people from all around the world are reaching out to us. You may have seen that on a few days, 2 weeks after they attacked us on the 29th, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, was trying to convince African people in Cameroon and Mali that when they were telling France to get the hell out of Africa, get the hell out of Mali, get the hell out of Cameroon, he was saying that that's not you who is saying that, that's Russia. Russian influence is the reason this is happening. So it's no accident that that this would happen 2 weeks after we attacked in Saint it is French though, in St. Louis, you know, that you had Macron making the same kind of claims about Russians being responsible for Africans being opposed to being treated like colonial commodities.
Well said. I was looking at some of the accomplishments that you've made through the Uhuru movement, economic development and community self-reliance projects such as Uhuru Furniture, Uhuru Foods, child care collectives, community gardens, fitness gyms. When I see something like this, it reminds me similar to some of the things that the Black Panthers did. I feel like the United States government sees that as a threat, because it's like you have found a way to help people in your community and you're not relying on the government to come in and try to help people, basically give people scraps and keep people where they are financially. That's what I think the government does. But you're able to help people yourself. And I think they see that as a threat because they really don't want, especially Black communities in this country, they really don't want Black communities to grow and thrive. They want us to kind of be at the bottom.
I think that's absolutely true, because what happens is that if we can do this with no resources, and by the way, I think it's also important that our organization functions in 130 some odd cities in this country where white people, these are white people who do work for reparations. That's all the work they do, and putting forth the struggle against colonialism for Black power. And that's in 30 states in this country. And when you see, we just spent more than $150,000 on a basketball court in this economically depressed community. And much of this money came from white people who say, I want to pay reparations for what we and America have done to black people because I support the struggle against colonialism. I think that also is a huge problem that they have, which is think about this. They could not get away with just attacking us in North St. Louis in the black community. They had to attack us in the white community in the form of white people now under assault as well. It's like Che Guevara said, solidarity has to be more than well-wishing. It's sharing the same fate, whether in victory or death. And that's why we've got more and more white people who are turning their backs on the colonial system and uniting with the oppressed African people in this country and around the world. So that is a threat. And it is a threat that black people can stand on our own feet because it says to somebody that if we can do this, and the government could do it if it wanted to do it, but it doesn't want to do it. In fact, it feels it necessary to maintain the status quo that we're confronted. So we're always kept in a state of dependency, poverty, desperation, etc. And of course, with that, there is no dignity.
That's right. I have one more question for you. One of the things that we've struggled with as well as Revolutionary Blackout Network is that we're struggling to kind of like really wake people up to what's really going on. A lot of people are asleep. I think some people are starting to get it. And I blame that basically on like the pandemic and inflation. Like people, well, a couple people up, but I feel like a lot of people are asleep. They mainly listen to mainstream media, or they're preoccupied. They're distracted by other things like Netflix or celebrity culture, like things that are really, I think, keeping our attention in places where it really should not be. How do you wake people up to what's really going on? How do you explain to people, for example, people that may live in poverty? How do you explain, listen, you need to realize that where you are right now, number one, is not your fault. And I've seen a lot of people blame themselves. It's not your fault. But also, this is how the system is designed, and it's working exactly the way it was designed. How do you wake people up to that?
I want you to come to St. Louis, and I want you to see it actually happening, you know, and every place we work, because that's the critical thing, and especially among the most oppressed sector, the most economically depressed sector of the population, to bring them into political life, to arm them with an understanding of this reality that we're confronted with, to help them to see that in the particular contradictions that they're confronted with, whether it's police violence, whether it's impoverished kinds of housing and circumstances, there's a universal contradiction. That's what we help to do. That's what we bring that to them, and not as saviors, but as somebody who can help the community stand on its own feet and reach its true height, you know, as a community. And so that's the work that we do. And we have to go against all kinds of things to make that happen, even Black elected officials. There's one extraordinary guy who is here in St. Louis, who's worked with us all along, but the majority of the elected officials, I mean, there's an elected official who wants to bring the National Guards in. We're talking about put a basketball court to help young people see themselves differently, to change the circumstances on the ground. He's saying, send the National Guards in. And this is a response by some of them. They have, and I'm really offended by it because, you know, here you have people with all kinds of connections. They got money, they got resources, they got education, they got all these things. And yet the people, the majority of the people, they want to spit on, they want to, you know, they want to relegate to some kind of trash that has no way of redemption. When it's they who really need redemption, and the people just need an opportunity to engage in changing their life and circumstance. So we do that. That's what we do. That's the thing that gives us any significance if we have it, is bringing the majority of African people into political life. We have Sunday rallies and meetings. We have created a farmers market so that people can come out, a flea market. In Philadelphia, we have more than 100 vendors feed their families, in part because they can come and participate in our flea market, and thousands of Black people from the northern east region come and participate in that because they want to buy what's there, and they want to be able to meet and greet with each other under these circumstances. So we just change the ground under the people, and we involve the people in that. When the people are involved in changing their changing the world, they become involved in changing themselves. So that's the formula that we really believe in and that motivates us.
Awesome. Chairman Omali, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. We're following your work, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for opening it up. And I want your listeners and viewers, if you would go to Hands Off Uhuru, handsoffuhuru.org, you can see I'm going to be moving throughout the country now, speaking about this attack and asking people to join with us in pushing back this FBI attack because they intend to imprison us and break this movement down. And it's an assault on all of us. So I look forward to everybody being with us. Handsoffuhuru.org. Thank you so much, comrade, dear sister Sabrina.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Uhuru.
Okay, guys, I hope you've learned a lot tonight. A great conversation there. Please follow them, guys. Follow them on Twitter. Follow them on YouTube. Follow the address that he just gave you, handsoffahuru.org. Please follow that as well. We want to make sure that we are continuing to follow their efforts, because what happened with them with this raid is absolutely ridiculous. I think we all know that. This should have never happened. And I think the FBI could be having their efforts focused other ways. I think the FBI should be putting that attention to other use. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. I want to go through these chats. I don't want to forget about you guys here, the chat. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Roger Meadows, forever being the eternal optimist that I am. The bright side of the FBI raid was that I never heard of you till now. Now I will be peeping the moves you guys are making. Thumbs up. Thank you so much for that, Roger. And I'm going to go to some of the comments here on YouTube. Saul said, Omali Yeshitela looking sharp. Want his hat. Leroy says, glad to be hearing this conversation. Peace. Angela, yeah, MSM didn't want to talk about this FBI raid, talked about Orange Man BS forever, still talking about it. But this has had a lot of silence. I agree. It's mainly been independent media picking it up. Shout out to Juliet Leak, who just became a Sabby member, and also Rosie Gale, who just became a Sabby member. So give them a big whoop, whoop. Thank you for the super chat. With our eyes rise. Consciousness, peace, Uhuru, soul/soul family. Chairman, how many state ballots are you on, and what do you have to do to get you on more? Oh, I can follow up with that question, but thank you so much for that. Thanks for this tip as well. Black Force reparations, Black Force the vote on reparations. Thank you so much for that. Johnny says those most negatively impacted by the system should be driving the agenda for its reform. Bingo. Thank you for saying that, Johnny. That is 100% true. It really needs to be led by, that's why I tell you, it needs to be led by working class, poor people. The people who are impacted are the ones who really need to lead it. Not saying other people can't participate, but the leaders should be the ones that are impacted. A non-user, as a white man, I am unfamiliar with history of imprisoned Black revolutionaries. Would make a great show. That's a good idea, Anon. Oh, that might have to be a double stream because, yeah, that could take a while. There's a lot to talk about with that. And thank you for this super chat, Juliet. Important discussion. Thank you, Sabby and Omali Yeshitela. Thank you so much, Juliet. Guys, definitely follow them on all the socials. I'm following them on Twitter as well. We got to stay in tune with what is happening with this situation here and support their efforts. If you can donate, because I believe there's a donate button or donate option on their website. Yes, there is. If you can donate, please donate to them, help them out. I'd rather have your money going to something like this. See, this is what I was talking about, mutual. Put your money towards something like this instead of giving that money to a politician. This is exactly what I've been telling you guys about. Donate your money to a group like that instead of donating your money to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Put your money to good use. Sorry, you see all the things they're doing for people in the community. And thank you for the super sticker, JM. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in with me for this special Wednesday stream. I'll be back tomorrow with more news. I hope you guys learned a lot tonight. Pass this on, share this with as many people as possible. We need to get this message out there. All right, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.